you probably have not experienced the joy, the utter elation of living a life where you simply do what it is you say you're going to do. I didn't start experiencing that until I went down this path of research over the past 5 years writing this book. And let me tell you, it has completely changed my life. I'm in the best shape of my life at age 42. I exercise consistently for the first time in my entire life. I used to be clinically obese. I spend more quality time with my family, my friends. I'm more productive at work than ever before. There is no facet of your life that is not touched by the ability to live with personal integrity and become indistractable.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Distraction. It's a symptom of cultural dysfunction. When I say those words, does it ring in your ears? Does it resonate? Do you understand what I even mean? Being distracted in a normal way of work really keeps you from playing at your fullest level. And if you can't play at your fullest level when you're distracted, then your team can't either. If you tune into this podcast to get insights about how you can take things to the next level, well, you're in luck today. We're going to talk about distraction and what that means inside your leadership, but also your culture. My special guest today is Nir Eyal. He is the author of Indistractable. It's a great book about how you can understand what distraction is doing to us. The research behind it is very powerful, and the examples within it, like Slack and BCG, Boston Consulting Group, really are powerful. There's many more examples in there, but we talk about some of those elements today and some of those very specific things you can do as a leader to create a culture that is not distracted, or it is indistractable, if you will. This conversation is powerful, so don't tune out. Make sure you stay focused. Here is Nir. Before we dive into the interview, I wanted to remind you that you can actually get a tool that I've been working with clients with for the last couple of years. I've refined this tool that's gone through several iterations. Now we have it completely automated. You can actually go online and fill out the leadership quiz. To get the leadership quiz, just go to theleadershipquiz.com. That's pretty easy, right? Theleadershipquiz.com. What you will get when you do that is you will answer a few questions. You will see where you rate based on the core principles of fast growth companies. If you're ready to grow your company or you want to see where you are, then make sure you go to theleadershipquiz.com. Inside it, you will get insight to where you are, understand where you want to improve, and you will get them mapped into the 10 areas that are most specific to fast growth companies. Again, go to theleadershipquiz.com and you can get that right now. Hi, Nir. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am fantastic. It's been a while since we've talked. I wrote an article about you for Inc. magazine a few months ago. Happy to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I know the book is doing well. I always ask every author this one question, so I want to start this with you. Why did this book have to be written?
This book had to be written because I had to write it. I was struggling with this problem in my own life that, I know there was one actually seminal moment in my life where I realized I had to reconsider my relationship with distraction, which was a few years ago. I was with my daughter one afternoon and I had this, just time to set aside to just be with her. And I remember that when we were playing together, we had this activity book of things that daddies and daughters could play together, different activities in this book. Make a paper airplane, the very, tic-tac-toe, all this stuff that you could do with your daughter. And one of the activities in the book was to ask each other this discussion starter, this question. And I remember it verbatim. The question was, if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? And while I can tell you the question word for word, I can't tell you her answer, because in that moment, I decided that it was a good time to look at my phone, and whatever was on my phone distracted me. And my daughter got the message that whatever was on my device was more important than she was. And she left the room. And by the time I looked up and realized what I'd done, she was gone. She was playing with some toy outside. And so that's when I realized I really had to reconsider my relationship with distraction, because it wasn't just technology, and it wasn't just with my daughter. I would sit down at my desk and say, okay, I'm going to focus. I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. I'm going to not get distracted. Here I go. I'm going to get to work. and I'd be putzing around on email instead of a big project. I would say I was going to exercise and yet didn't make it to the gym. I would say I would eat right, but wouldn't. And so time after time, these things I knew I wanted to do, I didn't get done. And this is not a problem I think I face alone. I think a lot of people have this problem. And we are struggling to find excuses, as we often do, right? So it used to be, you could say, well, I don't know what to do, right? I don't know how to lose weight. I don't know how to have better relationships with my family and friends. I don't know how to succeed at my job. With our generation, we don't have that excuse anymore. Just go on to Google, for God's sakes. It's all there, right? Who can honestly say they don't know the basics of how to lose weight? You eat right. That's all you have to do. It's not rocket science. We don't need to buy books to tell us. We know. Why don't we do it? Imagine the power we could all have. I mean, to me, it made my head spin. If I just thought, you know what? If I could have any superpower, I just want the power to do what it is I say I'm going to do. When I say I'm going to write. When I say I'm going to work out. When I say I'm going to be fully present with people, do that. When I say I'm going to work on that big project, do it. If you can do that, that is the skill of the century. As a business leader, as an employee, as a partner, right? As to your spouse, as a father or a mother, to be the kind of person that lives with personal integrity. That's the kind of person that people want to do business with. It's the kind of person that people want to love. It's the kind of person people want to befriend. We love people who have personal integrity, who do what they say they will do. And so I think this is the skill of the century, because there's never been a time where it's been easier to get distracted if that's what you're looking for. And so that's what this book is all about: how to live with personal integrity, choose your attention, and control your life.
Hold on for a second. Nir just talked about personal integrity. When you really understand that you are the creator of your world, you have alignment with your personal integrity. But the problem is, too many times you will promise yourself that you will do something and you don't do it. You will promise yourself that you'll get up early and work out. You'll promise yourself that you'll spend more time with your employees, and you let something else have more importance over that. Your personal integrity is about how you have this relationship with yourself and about you actually doing what you say you're going to do. Nir said it many times in this interview, but I wanted to remind you, if you have highest personal integrity, the standards that you set really do guide your leadership, which impacts everyone in the company. Back to the interview. I absolutely love that. My story is very similar to you about this. Where did you realize it? It was when my son was about 2 years old, and I was running a business, and I had 2 cell phones. So I only have one now, but at the time I needed 2 because of the way the business was running. And he had picked up the cell phones and had 2 to each ears, and I thought it was cute. And my wife goes, "Really? You think that's cute?" Yeah, that's the way he sees you, and that means you're showing up, not present for him.
Right.
And it caught me off guard. I said, "You're right."
All right, let me add one more story to the mix. It's really going to make your heart bleed here. I had a friend who I told this occasion when I was with my daughter, and I told him what happened. And so he said, that's interesting. I want to ask my daughter what superpower she would want. And so he asked his daughter, what superpower would you want if you could have any superpower? And she said that she would want the power to talk to animals. And he said, power to talk to animals? Why is that, honey? And she said, so that when you and mommy are on your computers, I'll have someone to talk to.
Wow.
And it's so true. It's not just with our kids. Even if you don't have kids, you know that this is a problem, right? Unless you're the kind of person who does everything they say they're going to do every day, that finishes all the things on their to-do list, you probably have not experienced the joy, the utter elation of living a life where you simply do what it is you say you're going to do. I didn't start experiencing that until I went down this path of research over the past 5 years writing this book. And let me tell you, it has completely changed my life. I'm in the best shape of my life at age 42. I exercise consistently for the first time in my entire life. I used to be clinically obese. I spend more quality time with my family, my friends. I'm more productive at work than ever before. There is no facet of your life that is not touched by the ability to live with personal integrity and become indistractable.
I'm going to champion this again. Love it, because I felt it within my own work. I know my clients feel it. I know that everyone is feeling that pressure of there's so much stuff going on that they can't be indistractable. But I know what works for me is when I can do that. So I want to kind of go deeper into this specifically as leaders. Most of the people listening to this, Nir, as I've already explained, are founders, CEOs, or leaders within companies that are growing fast. Right. And I want to kind of focus our conversation on how do we as leaders create that space for indistractable culture?
Yeah. So the best thing you can do to build an indistractable workplace is to become indistractable yourself.
Yeah.
And just like with parenting, right? You can't be a hypocrite. Children and employees come built in with hypocrisy detection devices. They have these little antennae that you can't see that are constantly looking for how you are being a hypocrite. So you can't tell your kids to stop playing Fortnite while you're checking email. You can't tell your employees about the importance of focused work, stop multitasking, stop checking Facebook, stop watching YouTube. When you're at a meeting, I can't tell you how many times, I get hired to do these, tens of thousands of dollar consulting projects. And time after time, I go to these meetings and we sit down around the table, and guess who is the person in the conference room that's checking their device? Guess who it is? Is it the intern?
CEO, the highest authority in the room.
It's not the millennial. It's not even the Gen Xer. It's the person who says, I'm so important, I must check email all the time. And they don't realize that doing that, it has a secondhand smoke effect. It really is a cancer of productivity, because what you're doing is you are showing everybody else how to behave. And you're showing them that you're a jerk, because you're telling them that your time is much more important to check email right now than everybody else's time around the table. And it's always the boss. It's always the hippo, the highest paid person. That's who tends to not have gotten the message that this is inappropriate behavior. And so let's all acknowledge, the research is unequivocal. The evidence that we do our best work when we are in a focused state is not even arguable anymore. We all know this, because there's really fundamentally two types of work. There's reactive work and there is reflective work. Reactive work is the reacting to the pings and dings, right? It's attending those meetings. It's responding to email, phone calls. That's reactive work. And if you work in a call center, that's 100% of your job. But if you're a leader, what the heck are you doing reacting all day to things, right? You need time for reflection. I don't know any business leader in any industry that can steer their company straight by simply reacting to stuff. Because if you don't have time for reflection, reflection is where the problem solving occurs, where the strategic planning occurs, where we make plans for the future. It has to only happen without interruption. We need that reflective time. And yet so few people up and down the hierarchy make that time or are even capable of knowing how to have that reflective time. They're constantly reacting to stuff. And that is death for your organization, because if you don't make time to work without distraction, you are letting distraction trick you into prioritizing the urgent at the expense of the important. And so none of the important stuff gets done, only the urgent stuff gets done. And then if a crisis strikes, or your competition does something you didn't expect, or there's an opportunity that you missed, oh my gosh, that's when real disasters happen. And so it's imperative that we set up these type of companies where people can work in an indistractable fashion.
Now, hold on. Nir just talked about reacting to stuff. I talk to leaders all the time where their common mode of operation is reaction. They have a list of things that they're going to do. They plan it out and they react to it. They feel more like firefighters than they do CEOs. And I'm going to tell you, if you want to play at the next level, then you've got to look at your own schedule and your own way of being. And if you're reactive by default, you have an opportunity to grow, to be more proactive. It's a term I use within my clients. It's one of the things I'm really looking at. I have a piece of paper right here on my desk that talks about being proactive. It is something I believe has served me really well and served a lot of the people I've seen that are highly successful to the highest degree. So if you're reactive, you've got to look at your own schedule and figure out, how do you make the transformation to being proactive? Now back to the interview.
But let's dive into, I think there's two parts here. So in my book, Indistractable, there's two parts to the book. There's the 4 steps that you can take right now to become indistractable yourself, that every one of your employees can take to become indistractable. There's only 4 steps to becoming indistractable. We can talk about how to do that in a minute. The second half of Indistractable is about this larger context of the environments we are in, because environments shape our behavior. So there's a whole section on how to be an indistractable parent, how to raise indistractable kids. There's a section on how to have indistractable relationships, about friendships and spousal relationships. And then there's a section on how to build an indistractable workplace, which I think addresses your question. So let's dive into that. First, let's start by understanding what is not the cause of the problem. You see, people today love blaming technology for just about everything. That technology is doing this to us, right? That it's the email's fault, it's the iPhone's fault, it's Facebook's fault, it's Slack's fault that we're so distracted. And I'm here to tell you that that's rubbish. That in the research I did, talking to dozens of companies, what I found is that there is no correlation between how much technology a company uses and how distracted people are. That in fact, what I found is that in the modern workplace, there are 3 conditions that make an indistractable workplace. 3 conditions. The first condition is that people have what's called psychological safety. Psychological safety is when we can raise our hands and say, something isn't right here. Can we talk about this problem that we're having in the workplace? Whether that problem is about how we can service our customers better, whether it's about a workplace harassment issue, whether it's about the problem of distraction. And it turns out that companies that don't provide their employees with psychological safety, this feeling that we can talk about our problems without fear of getting fired, those are the companies, lo and behold, that have the most distracted workforce. Because here's the thing. If you can't talk about this problem of distraction, your biggest problem is not distraction. Your biggest problem is that you can't talk about the problem, right? And let me prove to you that it's not technology that's doing it to us. Let's say you get a phone call from your boss at 9 o'clock at night when you're sitting down to dinner with your family. Now that boss calls you up and says, hey, I need you to do this and that at 9 o'clock at night. Now, is it the phone's fault that happened? Is it the technology? Or is it the boss that works in a company culture that makes that kind of behavior acceptable? So the first criteria of a company that is indistractable is that people can talk about this problem. And I profiled 2 companies in the book. One of them is the Boston Consulting Group, which I actually used to work at. It was my first job out of college. And this was about 20 years ago, where the culture in this workplace was horrible. They had a very high employee turnover rate. People left, including me, after my 2 years. I was out of there. It was a very difficult work environment. And they completely changed that culture. It started with one case team. They got together a group of 8 people, and they wanted to give them the psychological safety to talk about this problem of distraction. And it turned out once they talked about this problem, they actually solved it in no time, right? They didn't just borrow somebody else's solution. They talked about the problem. And I see this, by the way, all the time with CEOs. They say, oh yeah, distraction is totally a problem. We need to work in a more focused fashion. So let's all do email-free Fridays or no meeting Wednesdays. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because that's not the real problem. The real problem is that you can't talk about the problem with your employees. So that's criteria number 1, psychological safety. The next criteria is a forum to talk about these problems. So at BCG, at Boston Consulting Group, they instituted these weekly meetings, which they still do, where every week we get together and we talk about these types of issues. And what they find is that when they had the opportunity, the forum to talk about these problems, the floodgates opened. They could talk about how we could serve our customers better and how we can decrease employee turnover and what kind of problems they were facing. And once they opened the floodgate, they could solve all these issues. Another company, by the way, that I profile in the book is a company that so many people blame on distracting them, which is the company called Slack, right? So a lot of people know Slack. It's the world's largest group messaging platform. And so everybody says Slack is so distracting. It's constantly pinging and dinging them, and they blame the technology for making them distracted. So I went to Slack headquarters, and I knocked on their door, and I went to see for myself what this company looks like. And I expected, if the technology was the source of all this distraction, well, nobody uses Slack more than Slack. And so they should be the most distracted people on earth. But that's not what I found at all. That in fact, at 6:30, the office was empty. Everybody went home. And if you use Slack after hours at Slack, you're reprimanded. You are not allowed to use it on nights and weekends. That is not what they do there, because they have established this workplace culture that prioritizes working without distraction. It is part of who they are. And they've given people the channel, believe it or not, this is so interesting. The channel they use to give people the forum to talk about these problems is actually Slack channels. So BCG does it with weekly meetings. At Slack, they do it with Slack channel, where company management will actually use emoji to tell people that their problems have been seen and addressed. They'll use the eyes emoji to tell employees, yep, we saw that problem, or a check mark to say, okay, we did something about it. And they actually have a Slack channel called Beef Tweets, where it's all about posting your beef about the company. So having that channel, not just a suggestion box, but a forum to talk about problems is incredibly important. The third criteria, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is that management exemplifies what it means to be indistractable themselves. Because people emulate what the boss does. Culture flows downhill like water. And so when I walked into Slack headquarters, here's what shocked me. When you walk into Slack headquarters, you will see at this, hard-charging Silicon Valley startup, you will see on the wall, written in bright pink neon letters, it says, work hard and go home. Work hard and go home. It says it on the wall of the company. And the company's killing it. They're doing great because it is part of their company culture. And they do better because they give people a workplace that enables them to be indistractable by giving people psychological safety, a forum to talk about these issues, and management exemplifies what it means to be indistractable.
When you talk about this, it just makes me excited because I know organizations, most of them don't operate this way. And
yet.
You know that.
I'm on a mission.
you got a lot of work to do.
That's right.
But there's some little things they can do, like a Slack channel, right? That's free. If you're already using Slack, you probably have other tools. Like that doesn't cost money to listen.
No, none of this costs money. None of this costs money. In fact, it will make you money. We know for a fact that people are more productive. They have greater sense of well-being and lower employee turnover when they are focused, when they have the ability to control their environment. Here's the thing. There's been research out for over a decade now. There's two researchers from Oxford by the name of Stansfield and Candy. And they discovered a causal relationship between the workplace culture and depression and anxiety disorder. Okay, that there's a certain type of work that literally causes, this is very rare in the social sciences. You see oftentimes a correlation, but rarely a causal relationship. But in this case, what Stansfield and Candy found was that you can actually find a causal link between a certain type of workplace environment and depression and anxiety disorder. There's a certain type of workplace that is literally making us sick. It is driving us crazy, literally. And that type of work environment is one where you have high expectations and low control. Okay? High expectations and control. If you have high expectations and high control, no problem. People rise to the occasion. Okay, so I'm not advising, work less. Let's all go to France and work a 35-hour work week. No, if you want to work a lot of hours, or your employees know what they're going to get when they come and work for you, that you have a demanding type of job, and that's what employees know they're going to get, no problem. But if you give people the kind of work environment where they have high expectations and low control, this literally leads to depression, anxiety disorder. And what do people do when they feel depressed, when they feel anxious, when they feel out of control? You know what they do? They send more superfluous emails. They call more stupid meetings that don't need to be called. They enter more crap on Slack channels that waste everybody's time. So it's not as bad as if, I kind of wish people would go on Facebook and just check that for a while. But they don't, many times high performing people don't do that. They don't even realize what they're doing because they don't feel in control, because they feel anxious, because they don't feel like they can actually, that they don't control their environment, right? Because their environment always wants them all and always wants them connected because things feel out of control. Not only do they distract themselves with all this superfluous, unnecessary work, they distract everyone else as well. And so we need to get to the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem is that distraction is a symptom of cultural dysfunction. Let me say that again. Distraction is a symptom of cultural dysfunction. If you struggle with distraction in your workplace, if you feel like you are always on, that employees are constantly connected, like they're burning out, this is a bigger problem than you realize, because there's all kinds of other stuff that people aren't telling you because they can't talk about this problem of distraction.
I'm writing that down because it's such a beautiful element that distraction is a symptom of cultural dysfunction. Um, we've been talking about this need. We set up with the whole why it's important, and everyone understands that focus is really important. You talked about, technology is not the problem because everyone wants to blame. We're always on, and the bings and the emails and the Slacks and the text and everything like that. So that's not the problem. But the real issue is, us leaders really understanding what's going on. And I think you laid out a very well researched thesis here. But I'm going to recommend too, audience, I don't say this much, but go buy this book. I've read it. It's powerful. It really is a great way for you to look at your own indistraction. And that's where you start first. Anything you want to add to that, Nir?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that ringing endorsement. And I think that this is really a problem that we can do something about. And I think as leaders, it's really up to us. I mean, this is how we start to not only change our work life, our families, this is how we change the world. I mean, this is going to happen. It's kind of like with smoking. I remember when I was a kid, I was born in the 1970s, but I grew up in the 80s. I clearly remember most of the 80s. And I remember in the early 80s, we used to have ashtrays in our house, right? In our living room. My parents didn't smoke, and yet we had ashtrays in the living room. Why did that happen? Why was that the case? Because back then, when people came to your house, they just expected to smoke. They just expected to light up in your living room. Can you imagine if someone came to your house and lit up a cigarette in your living room? That would be unimaginable, right? That would be incredibly rude. Well, what changed? Was it some regulation that said we can't smoke in someone's private residence? No, there's never been such a law. What changed is that people stood up, like my mom, and took away the ashtrays one day. And when someone lit up a cigarette in her living room, she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're non-smokers," right? If you want to smoke, that's no problem. Please go outside. And at the time, this was so rude, right? This was unthinkable to ask someone to go outside to smoke. Of course, now it's commonplace. It would be rude to do otherwise. And so that's what's happening to society today when it comes to our distraction. We're just now starting to realize that we have to spread what we call social antibodies. That when societies have these harmful behaviors, we need to inoculate each other from these rude behaviors by calling each other out. And so what I'm looking for is to start this movement of people who say, look, I am indistractable. I control my attention. I control my time. I control my life. And anyone else who's not indistractable, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have a bifurcation of people who let their time and attention and their life be controlled by others, and people who say, nope, I control my time and attention in my life. I am indistractable.
Well, powerful work. I love the research. I love the simplicity that you've boiled it down to. You make it look easy. I know it's a lot of work to write books like this. So thank you for being here on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Now you have context. You don't want to have a business that is filled with people that are unfocused or distracted. You want to have your leadership focused on the distraction that's going on in the business. You want to be proactive about making some changes so that you can create everything that Nir talked about, creating psychological safety, creating a forum for people to talk about the things that are going on so that they can remove that distraction and so that management and leadership can understand and tune in. It's a great example of what we must do and how we must operate as leaders if we want our businesses to go to the next level. Now, if you are a leader that's challenged with your own growth, there's something that you can't put your finger on, I'd love to have a conversation with you. This is what I do. I talk with founders and CEOs of fast growth companies. I help them create teams that are growing, have that sense of ownership, and really help those leaders go beyond what they think is possible. If you have any questions about that, make sure you reach out to me, Gene@genehammett.com. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.